Hey, we've got a problem here.
So, what's the plan?
What's your plan?
What are your plans?
What's the plan?
What's the plan?
What's your plan?
What's your plan of action?
Plan.
What's the plan?
So, what is the plan?
Wait, I have a plan.
I have a plan.
I have a plan.
That's the plan.
I have a plan here.
This plan's gonna work. Master Plan, Phase 1, Side A.
I love everything about your plan.
भाई इससे कहते हैं planning.
What's it say?
Well, it says, I love it when a plan comes together.
Holly, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks,
We missed
Paddy.
you last time.
I know, it feels like it's been a while, doesn't it?
I know, fantastic to have you back. And we've also got Julian Cribb
Yes, we
today
do.
as part of our panel, and we're going to interview him. We've got a pretty fun program, and we're going to be going over a number of things today. We're going to be going over the virtual conference, which is coming up tomorrow. This
Yep.
is the second one we've had.
It is,
Cisco is
yeah.
sponsoring that as part of a global video conferencing network with schools.
Yeah, that'll be fantastic.
We're going to talk about the conference in Mauritius. We're going to talk about getting all of the regional plans together, which we're looking to get presented in a brief form at the conference. And we've got the latest on the actual conference. We've got some pretty exciting parts to that as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. So we've got a busy schedule lined up then.
As usual, and apologies for running a few minutes late. We had a slight technical issue, but we've got over that. But I noticed you've got your ANU top on as well.
Yeah, no, I do. It's my good old A&E Law jumper.
Is
so-
that right? Is that
Yeah.
right? Well, one of the things we want to be doing with the program is obviously encouraging students to take all of the learning they've got and take that into higher education and into their careers. So we're going to be talking about Julian's career as well as a science writer and the latest book that he's brought out.
Great. No, I'm looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah, look, it's going to be great. But before we do that, we always start with our acknowledgement to country, because that's really important. And just remembering that Australia actually has, from what I understand, the longest history of caring for country on the planet.
Yeah.
50,000 years. And therefore, we always like to acknowledge, do the acknowledgement to country and acknowledge Australians, Indigenous people, who have set an example not only for our country, but also for the planet. And acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of the country, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, the first innovators and carers. And we especially recognise the elders of tomorrow, which are all of the students and Indigenous students, for you are the future of this earth. So let's join together and respect and acknowledge all First Nations, and that we can walk together forward, or walk forward together. So that's really important that we start that way,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
it talks about our history and acknowledges the fantastic background we have as Australians.
Definitely.
So let's jump into the program. The first part of today is going to be about a little bit about what we're going to be doing next year. And next year, as well as putting together, let me see, international plans. So we've already got the Australian National Plan, we've got the Mauritius National Plan, but we're going to be putting together the first international plan at the conference in Mauritius. But as well as that, the second part of the conference is actually going to be looking at specific projects that come out of the actual plan. So it's no good just having a plan and putting it on a shelf, and that's not going to really make much difference. So it's important to have an overall plan, but also to be able to translate that into practice.
Absolutely. Implement what we're doing.
Exactly. And now implementation's actually the fun part. So we've set up the plans. We'll be at the conference talking a little bit about each of the regional plans and state plans set up in the set up by each of the groups of schools in each state. So we want a 5-minute presentation. We'll be sending out details to those schools to actually prepare that. We'll get those presented, and then we'll be building that international plan. That's day 1. Day 2, we'll be developing specific projects across all of the 17 SDGs for both Mauritius and for Australia.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a lot
So
to
that's
do
going to be a lot of projects. But the great news is some of the students have already started that.
Yeah.
So we're going to hear now a little bit about some of the work that Pimlico has been doing, and one of the students there, on the Great Barrier Reef.
Awesome.
Yeah.
These guys have really been on the ball, haven't they?
Look, all the schools have.
Yeah.
I have to say, we've got the Rubbish Rangers over in Kent Street who set up a program because they were so keen to get involved. They actually set up a program looking at rubbish in the school, and they allocated across their team saying, look, we know this is more over and above the Plan for the Planet, but they made sure all of the rubbish was cleared up in all of the areas. And guess what the other students and teachers said?
What did they say?
They said, why are you on detention? However, they were then able to explain what we were doing with Plan for the Planet, and that's enabled other students to get involved. Our teams in Victoria have done a fantastic job. Colby and Viewbank, Morialta in South Australia, and all of the teams up in Queensland, New South Wales, in Roseville, and it's been pretty exciting. And then we've got Newtown down in Tasmania, and then all of the fantastic work done in Mauritius. So, and actually one other thing, in Mauritius, some of the schools, 3 of the schools are going over earlier and staying a little bit later after the conference to actually work on specific projects in Mauritius.
Oh, good on them.
Yeah, so it's all starting to happen in terms of translating the plan into action. So why don't we have a listen to what the Pimlico team have been doing up in Queensland?
Sounds good. Let's do it.
So good evening, everyone. As you know, my name is Kailash Cook, and I grew up in a small island in the Gulf of Thailand called Koh Tao. And this island wasn't very big at all. It was only 21 square kilometers and home to a couple thousand locals. But Koh Tao is one of the most popular tourist destinations in Southeast Asia. Its entire economy thrives on the 500,000 tourists that come to the island every year. Koh Tao is mostly famous for its cheap scuba diving courses and astonishing tropical reefs, so much so that it is the #1 PADI certification location in the world. But this puts enormous pressure on the reefs. And what I'm here to talk about is how a group of passionate people with the freedom to experiment were able to protect the environment that they love. So, some of my earliest memories were like this photo, swimming amongst the fish and observing the beauty of the reef. And this sparked a great passion for the ecosystem and the joy it brought me. As I got older, I began to get involved in reef restoration activities and learn even more about the reef. This is my dad, Nathan Cook, and without him, I would not be the person I am today. He taught me how the corals were under threat from inexperienced divers and that we needed to do all we could to protect it. He got me involved in coral nursery management, reef check surveys, and turtle releases, and countless other projects. And this opened my eyes to the more complex problems and how when we worked together, we could grow new corals, measure the fish populations, and even increased the population of an endangered species, and a hope started to brew inside me at this thought. But even as I was doing all this work, I still never truly understood what the true scale was of what was happening to the reefs around the world. Sure, I'd seen pictures and heard stories, but that's all they sounded like, stories. That was until 2010, when a bleaching event swept through Southeast Asia, wiping out the reefs that I had grown up around all my life. I remember this field of branching coral, how I used to search for the fish amongst the arms of the coral, and how in the span of a couple of months, it completely disappeared. This was happening all over the island. Even things like anemones, which I didn't even know could bleach, were dying off. And this was when I realized how much coral reefs were threatened from climate change, and that I needed to do everything I could to protect these amazing ecosystems. As a community, we undertook a number of activities to improve the health of our local coral reefs. One of our most popular projects was the management of our coral nurseries. These were some of our most successful projects, as they allowed us to grow coral and use it to repopulate the degraded reefs. But arguably, much like Adam said earlier, the biggest value of these nurseries was the fact that it raised awareness of the tourists on the health of the reef and allowed them to get involved and contribute to a solution. In the next slide coming up is Dev, and he is one of Koh Tau's conservation heroes from as far back as I can remember. Together, with the help of the local community, we constructed Buoyancy World, which is what you can see in this picture. This was a completely man-made reef that was designed to accommodate diver training and take pressure of overcrowding away from the natural reefs. This was a project that took 15 dive schools a whole year to complete. Together, we created a number of structures, from cement octopi to the framework of a shipwreck. We allowed the creativity of the island to come to life and create one of the most popular dive sites on the island. In the 9 years Buoyancy World has been active, we have tended to it with great care, repairing broken structures, and even taking corals from our nurseries and planting them on structures like this shipwreck. With this work, we, a small group of passionate people, have created a vibrant, biodiverse ecosystem that has become home to hundreds of marine organisms. And I guess the whole point of these stories is I'm trying to tell you that when a group of passionate people are allowed to experiment and come up with creative ways to fix problems, they can accomplish amazing things that have never been done before. By undertaking these projects as a community, we have enabled everyone to be part of creative solutions to improve the health of the reef. We became inspired by those people who embodied conservation, people like Chad Scott, who is in this photo, who shared his knowledge about the reefs and passion for marine conservation. And though he has now moved back to the USA fighting leukemia, his true home remains underwater in Koh Tao, and his legacy continues through the efforts of a community that are carrying on what he started, purely because of the inspiration he brought to them. And this group of inspired people continue to build artificial reefs, grow corals, and share knowledge, just like Chad did. It's people like Chad, Nathan, and Dev who inspired me to share some of my own knowledge once I got older. In 2016, I had the pleasure of traveling to Hawaii for the International Coral Reef Symposium, providing what insights I could about the community-based marine conservation programs. I spent 4 years with the help of Nathan and Chad and many volunteers, surveying the artificial reefs we created to discover new information never before looked at on Koh Tao. And I shared this with the international scientific community at this important conference. So I guess what I'm trying to say to you all is that it only takes one passionate individual to inspire a community to make a big difference. As overused as this phrase is, I've seen it with my own eyes, and I know it is true, and becoming ever more essential as climate change and other threats become more prominent. That was my favorite fish, the whale shark, and I don't want to see this fish go extinct. And to make that happen, I need all of your help to be the inspiration that we so desperately need in this critical time. Thank you.
Isn't that inspiring, Holly?
That's absolutely amazing.
It really is. And what's incredible is the work that's happening with the team.
Yeah.
Because I know it's not just one person, it's actually the whole team working up there. And all of the students being an inspiration to each other.
The
and
power of collaboration, isn't it?
Look, it is, and we now have over 700 students who've been through the program in both Australia and in Mauritius. And next year we're looking to expand out to probably 10 to 12 other countries.
Yeah.
So it's pretty exciting times.
Really connecting dots across the
Look, it
globe, aren't we?
has. And what we're finding is that students, having done the work on looking at the issues and preparing the plans, are now really feeling empowered and enabled to actually start taking on projects exactly as we've seen there. So one of the tasks, or one of the things that's going to happen in Mauritius, is the team in Pimlico are coming across to look at the reef systems over in Mauritius, and the Pimlico and the Mauritius teams are going to look at what they can actually do based on the knowledge that's already been accumulated as part of the initiative happening at Pimlico. So we're starting to see some real momentum. So it's pretty fun, but we've got another fun bit on today.
Yeah, we do.
Which is Julian.
So should we get to that now?
Look, I think we should, because we've got a couple of things to talk about there.
Yeah.
And first one is Julian's book, so why don't we go over and meet Julian?
Alrighty.
And then we can have a chat about what he's been doing.
Sounds good. Let's do
Great.
it.
Julian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ian. Delighted.
We're very excited to have you here. And for all of our audience, we tried to get Julian along to our conference last year, and he was caught up, and I think some of the work was to do with the launch of his book. We were looking at trying to, actually Julian was at the launch of our original Plan for the Planet. So what we wanted to do today is talk to you a little bit, Julian, about firstly your career, because Julian, as a science writer, has just been nominated for ACT. I was going to say Young Australian of the Year, but I think it's Australian of the Year, isn't it?
It was Senior Australian of the Year.
Oh, Senior Australian.
Yeah. I'm senior now. I don't feel it, but
no, I wouldn't have known. So we're going to talk to Julian a little bit about his career, because our audience are all looking at how their careers are going to pan out.
Yep.
And we're really encouraging students to think about STEM skills, science, technology, engineering, maths, and how that can be applied to sustainability. Now that's pretty much what you've done, Julian, taking your science background. So how did you get into that in the first place?
Well, I don't actually have a science background.
Right.
I did 1 year of chemistry and physics in high school.
Right.
And that was it, because I went to school in England.
Right.
But when I was at university, I was studying ancient Greek.
Right.
And I needed to buy a red sports car, as you do when you're studying ancient Greek and you're at university.
Yes, I can understand this.
So I got a job on a newspaper.
Right.
You see, and the newspaper gave me the money to buy the sports car, and the sports car gave me access to good times.
Yes.
And the Beach Boys and things like that, you know. So I was a journalist, basically, from the time I was at university. And in the 1970s, I got a job on a farming paper, a little farming paper in Western Australia that had just started up. And, you know, it was very exciting. I knew nothing about farming. I knew nothing about science. But I started learning about both by talking to the scientists, talking to the farmers, and things like that, and not concealing my ignorance. And I've been doing that now for 40-odd years.
Right.
And I'm still writing about food and about science. And that whole time I have, borrowed the knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding, the insights that scientists have generously shared with me. And I, in turn, as a journalist, have been sharing those more widely with other people. So I was a newspaper editor for many years. I was the chief science correspondent on the Australian newspaper, the National Daily. And then I ran my own science communication business for quite a long time. I was at CSIRO as well.
Look, that's really interesting, because that 1 year of science basically, in some ways, opened up a whole career.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as though you even followed that through all the way, or didn't need to, because what you did, which is what a lot of our students are doing at the moment, which is coming into the whole concept of the Sustainable Development Goals, a sustainable future, and going in and talking to the experts and learning, and skilling up really to be able to address some of the major challenges on the planet.
Yeah, well, it wasn't long before I realised that scientists don't explain themselves terribly well. They often use big long words, complicated language, difficult concepts. And my job as a journalist was to turn that stuff into easy, plain English that everyone can understand. And this, I discovered, there's a huge need for this, to convert science into stuff that everyday people can use in their lives, in their jobs, and what they do, and to understand what's going on in the world around us.
That's really interesting, Julian, because what that really says is the fundamentals aren't that complicated. In fact, a lot of it is just explaining it in plain English.
Yeah, the science, the detail of the science is complicated,
right,
but the essential scientific messages, the findings, can be distilled into advice that ordinary people can use in their lives. What to eat, how to dress, how to go about your life in terms of the energy you use and things like that, how to preserve the environment and the ecosystems that support us and so on. It's all fairly common sense, actually. But now we're starting to get tremendous heaps of scientific evidence to tell us what to do and what not to do. I mean, that's the difference. Today
and how to survive the 21st century.
Yes, indeed, yeah. And that is the title of the last book that I published.
Which we happen to have a copy of here.
Yeah, it's a pretty grim sort of a title, but I was bumping into a lot of scientists,
yes,
and indeed grandparents like myself,
yes,
who were starting to say to me, is this the end of history?
Right.
Are we going to be one of the last generations of humanity? Because we're doing all these things to our planet.
Yes.
And we're not really making the effort to do it. And I didn't know whether what they were saying was right or not, but I'm a journalist, so I decided I would find out. So I looked into all of the various threats that I knew of,
right,
and saw what the science was saying.
Right.
What is the scientific evidence? And the bottom line is, it's not just about climate change. Climate change is a big one, but there are 10. There are 10 very large threats to the human existence, the human future,
right,
the future of civilization. And the scientific evidence for them is overwhelming. Some of them are ill-defined. For example, the deluge of chemicals that we're spilling all over the planet at the moment. We haven't really got enough data on that yet. But all of these things have to be fixed, and they have to be fixed in this generation. Otherwise, something pretty horrible is going to happen. And the key thing here is that the solutions are not that complicated. They are within all our powers. As citizens, as consumers, as kids growing up, who want to take an active part in the world. There are solutions, but the solutions have to be cross-cutting. They have to solve all of these 10 problems. That's the key message in this book. You can't just solve one problem over here. Let's fix climate. But if we fix climate, all the other 9 problems, 9 big issues, are just going to go on getting worse. Or you may make some of them worse. So you have to solve all of these issues with cross-cutting solutions at the same time. The solutions have to be very well thought out.
Classic domino effect, isn't it? Everything's very much interrelated.
Well, everything is joined up. It's like an ecosystem. Yeah,
Yeah.
Everything is connected together, and we need to fix the whole ecosystem. It's caused by the fact that we humans not only have our numbers, they've tripled in my lifetime, right? The number of humans on the planet has tripled. It's gone from 2.5 billion, which was a sustainable population, to 7.5 billion, which isn't sustainable, and it's going to go to 10 billion, which is even less sustainable. And those people are using more stuff, right? So every person on the planet is now using 10 times as much stuff as their grandparents were using. So that means basically the human race is using 40 times more stuff than it was a century ago. And, you know, the planet just can't hack that. You know,
so do you think there's a up chance that we'll run out of stuff?
Yeah, we'll definitely run out of stuff. We're already running out of water, we're running out of soil, we're running out of certain strategic minerals. You know, we're breaching the limits, or we're releasing vast quantities of pollution, you know, into the atmosphere, into the oceans, into our living environment. And this is having a bad effect. So whatever we've been doing in the past, just mining things and using them and then throwing them away, cannot continue. So an example of a solution, if I could just give you one.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need a circular economy, which is one where you use everything that you throw away. You reuse it and reuse it and reuse it. And if you have a circular economy, you don't need any more mines, you know. You actually don't need any more farms. You can keep on using the nutrients and things like that. So you can actually reduce your impact on the planet, provided you have a circular economy. We've got to get out of this habit of just throwing everything away.
It's really interesting, because if we look at the natural environment, it's a circular economy, isn't it?
It is indeed.
Everything sort of goes around, and it's interesting what you were saying, and recycles. Leaves fall off trees, they then become fertiliser, etc. So what we have the opportunity to do, which is interesting, that point about solutions, that the solutions are all there.
Yeah.
And that's what our students were finding. We through them, the 17 SDGs, and everybody was able to come up with solutions.
Yeah.
But that point you made about, one, the solutions are there, but the coordinated effort to address them is critical, means that the work that the students are doing in pulling together these plans and now projects to actually deliver those is absolutely critical in our generation.
Your students are brilliant for this reason. They are demonstrating that you can solve these problems in a local and an individual sense. So that's one of the key messages in this book, that it's up to us as individuals. It's not, we can't wait until governments decide to solve the problem, because they never will most often. We have got to solve it as individuals. We've got to change the way we eat, change the way we warm and cool our houses, you know, change the way we use energy. Everything has to be done at the individual level. I mean, the unsustainable world is set up by money. You know, how you spend your money, things like that. And this is the key to it. If you think about climate change, or you think about nuclear war or something like that, they all look like huge big problems, and what can I do about that? But in reality, there's an awful lot you can do about it. In your daily life, in the choices you make, the things you buy or don't buy, you need to send a signal to the world that I want sustainable food, I want sustainable clothing, I want sustainable energy, renewable energy. Once you start sending that signal, the economy will respond, and companies will start producing this. And you're an expert on that, because you wrote Plan for the Planet, didn't you? The business plan, and you've tried to get business engaged in this.
Look, absolutely. And it's interesting 5 years down the line, because what has really happened is the students have picked up that and embraced it and run with that concept. So in the beginning it was thinking about business, who's going to be able to actually pull together you know, all of these disparate things and actually address them. And it was the work with Questacon and Graham Durrance and the team here that really highlighted that, in fact, students and young Australians and now young Mauritians and young people actually have all of the skills, the capability to bring that all together. And I remember, I've got to say this, when we first sat down, we had a meeting and we had the chief scientist, or one of the members of the chief scientist team, say, look, shouldn't you just pick one of the UN SDGs? And we said, well, no, that defeats the purpose. It's exactly as you said. Yep. So I'll tell you a second thing that happened. I then said, well, 17 is really complicated. How about we break them down and group them? And that's what we did last year under a couple of headings. And so we had 12, and I figured 12 was easy. And what we found over the first year is that the students could quite easily deal with 17. So now we've got rid of the 12 and we haven't focused on the one, and they've been able to produce the plans, and all based on everything being interconnected. And actually, let me see, as you said, the solutions are there. But what I was really interested in that video we had earlier from the team in Pimlico was that how individual students and schools and in fact whole groups of young people are now starting to embrace those issues. And as you said, individuals can actually make a big difference.
A huge difference, because, I mean, well, you wrote the book about business. Business responds to one thing, that's money, okay? If the consumer stops buying your product in business and your profits go down, you get a big signal, you know, and you have to change your game. Whatever it is you're producing, you have to change it. So if enough consumers are responding to that signal, you know, to become more sustainable, to buy cleaner products, healthier products, safer products, and so on, that sends the message that this millions and millions of decisions by people every day at the supermarket checkout will change the planet. Now, the coral reef is a very good example. You cannot save the world's coral reefs unless we stop burning coal and unless we stop burning oil and gas. Now, at the bottom line, we can do a lot to sort of support the coral reefs and look after them, but in the end, whether they survive or not depends on us keeping the world's temperature down. What's the answer to that? The answer is, let's go for clean, renewable energy. Let's go for electric cars, electric aeroplanes, all of this new technology that's coming down the line. And that's, as people swap from the dirty system to the clean system, from the system that's wrecking the climate to the system that's protecting the climate, this huge dollar signal is going out to industry saying, don't produce coal-fired power stations, produce solar arrays, you know, produce wind farms and things like that instead. So the little decisions taken by us in our lives can make business change what it does.
And it's really interesting. The other thing I found about business is that most business people actually have kids.
They do.
And what I've found is that even over the last 5 years since I published Plan for the Planet, we've seen a significant shift in business because business people are starting to think not only about the bottom line, but about what a sustainable future looks like. And last time we mentioned a film that'll be coming out next year, which is by one of the filmmakers who made That Sugar film. And he's looked at what a sustainable future would look like, even building on the technologies we already have here, and what 2040 would look like. And it looks great. So it's really interesting. We're facing all of these challenges as you've outlined. However, the solutions are in our hands, and our students are showing that, in fact, that can be made a reality. So it's a pretty exciting time, really.
Well, let me give you an example of that. I've just finished a book about the future of food.
Another book?
Yes, a new one.
Oh, right, okay.
So
you heard it here first.
Right. It's called Food or War, because those are the two choices that the whole human race is facing. If we don't have enough food, we're going to fight. And that's what we've done all through history, so you know, it's not terribly surprising. But the point is, the food system we've got today is not going to survive. Not going to survive past the mid-century. It's running out of water, it's running out of soil, it's running out of a stable climate, it's spewing poison left, right and centre. It's going to go down. So we need a new food system, one that is clean, sustainable, is proof against climate and things like that. And that's starting to happen now. You're seeing people farming in the cities. You're seeing aquaculture, fish farming, growing not only fish but also sea plants and things like that. So there's a huge change in the diet that we're going to eat. But at the end of the day, it comes down to us making that decision in the supermarket that we're going to buy the sustainable food that doesn't destroy the soil or doesn't waste the water, rather than the unsustainable food that is produced by today's techniques. So again, this is the thing where it comes down to each of us as individuals. we can change the world. Let's not wait for big companies. Let's not wait for governments especially, because governments, they just want to play politics. Most of them do not care whether, you know, we survive or not. They just want to play games. And, you know, and I think the nation state is probably busted. It's had its day. By the end of the century, it'll be gone. Because at the moment, they're just acting totally irresponsibly. You see cities like New York and so on are going for green energy and things like that. We're seeing that in Australia, where the states are going for South Australia and so on, going for green energy, when the federal government's desperately going for polluting, dirty energy. You know, so it's...
They're still playing catch up, aren't they? But it's exciting because the states are. And what we're seeing in the ACT, I was actually out at, let me see, development, 11,000 houses out on the edge of ACT yesterday, Australian Capital Territory for our Mauritius viewers, and they're building a completely sustainable development project in that area. It's based on all of this. So you're right, we're seeing inroads being made and that's individual, that's a business. And they're saying, look, we want to make a sustainable future. So we're starting to see some momentum building, but the work that the students are doing is really reinforcing that, which is pretty exciting.
Well, that's it, and they're ready to take on the responsibility, which I think has been abandoned by my generation, the grandpas and grandmas. We've let the side down here. We've allowed this explosion of people to overexploit the planet. Now, unfortunately, the mess has to be tidied up by the next generation, but they're doing it. And the more they understand that the power lies with them, the power lies with each one of you, each individual, to make good decisions about what you buy, what you wear, how you build your home, where you build your home, you know, how you look after the environment. Those decisions can change the world. They can protect and secure the human future at a time when governments basically don't care, you know. So, you know, young people, please keep at it, hard at it, because you are the future, you are building the future. Your choices will define what the future is for humanity.
Very much think big, start small, one step at a time.
Look, absolutely. And the interesting thing is also that we, let me see, Julian and I worked on a project actually looking at Northern Australia.
You've only recently published that as
That's
well,
right.
you?
That came out about a month ago. And what we found is focusing on a sustainable agenda actually expanded the opportunities, building on a lot of Indigenous knowledge in Northern Australia, building on sustainable energy, as Julian spoke about, and looking at a whole lot of sustainability practices, and it potentially grew the economic prosperity as well as the social and the ecological. So it's not as though we're looking at going backwards here. This is actually an exciting, sustainable, prosperous future that we're looking at.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the most exciting ideas that we raised there was the energy superhighway. And the energy superhighway is just a big wire that stretches from Sydney up to, say, Port Hedland in the north of Australia, up to Indonesia, up Malaysia, as far as China. That's a direct current high voltage power line in which every kind of energy that we've got, wind energy, solar energy, clean coal if they've got it, you know, hot rocks, can play. An energy superhighway can change the nature of the human future. I mean, your little solar discs on the roof of your house could be running a factory in China while you're at work. You know, if we had an energy superhighway to carry the electrons up to China direct. Why do we need to ship the coal, you know, when we can send them electrons? Look, so these ideas are very important to get them out.
Well, the technology's on our side, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
We've just got to capitalise on it, don't we?
Look, absolutely. And the other exciting thing I found about that project, and thanks, Julian, it was terrific working together on that, was that there's a small dot in Australia, quite small, which can power the whole of Australia in just terms of solar, and about 20%, or maybe not even 20%, less than 20% of solar in, say, the Northern Territory of Australia. So putting solar across the desert regions could power the entire planet. Yeah. So we have enough power here to in fact power the entire planet, and the energy superhighway, the technology now gives us the capability of doing that.
We've just got to reprioritise, I think, where our allocation of resources is going.
That's right, and that's again where the planning part comes, because it was interesting in Mauritius. A copy of the Mauritius Plan for the Planet went to every MP in across Mauritius, and the Mauritius Commercial Bank sponsored that, and they are now building, so talking about sustainable business, building their whole future business model about sustainable strategy. Everybody they fund in the community, whether it's social, whether it's commercial, will be about sustainability. So we're turning a corner, and our students are actually leading the way.
It's wonderful, isn't it? You know?
Look, it really is. Julian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
We feel very privileged.
Thank you.
And we look forward to having you back again.
Thanks very much. I'd love to come.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we might go back. We've got a little bit more to finish off with today. But again, Julian, thank you. And thank you, Holly, for joining us for our special question time with Julian. Great. Awesome. Thank you, Julian.
Thanks.
That was fascinating, absolutely fascinating, Holly.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah, and it's really exciting to see that, yes, we've got all of these challenges, but we've got all the solutions, and our young people are, in fact, the key to moving forward and addressing those. And the students are picking up all of the skills to actually do that, and that's part of what the program is about.
It's very much in some ways about trying to change hearts and minds.
It
and
is.
Again, going back to that reprioritizing how we can use what we already have.
Absolutely. So, look, we've got a couple of things that are facilitating this. One of them is the conference coming up in November. So just a reiteration of that. We've got a pretty detailed program. I'm not going to go through every little bit of it, but it's all about leveraging STEM skills and global competencies to deliver the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We now have introduced our Cisco sponsored Digital Schools Network, so that tomorrow at 3:30 we're going to have our second conference where all of the school students teams can actually join up. So there's a note that's gone out to everybody. If you haven't joined the Digital Schools Network, sign up and then you can join that video. So any questions about the conference, about the delivery projects, about how you can get more involved or even work with other schools both in Australia and across other countries, you can discuss there as well.
Right.
So we've got that, and then finally we've got our regional plans. So each state is pulling together their regional plan, ACT as a territory is, so that we'll have a whole lot of regional plans we'll be able to present at the conference. So we'll then have regional plans, national plans, and our first international plan, and a whole lot of delivery projects out of it.
It's all coming together, isn't it?
Look, it is in a sort of...
slowly but surely.
Well, I don't know, it's going so slowly.
Oh, well,
it's
that's
quite
true, isn't it?
amazing.
Yeah, it's,
2 years down the line already, 700 students.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Over 30 schools and over 30 regions. And next year we're looking to expand out even further.
Yeah, no, it's exciting, isn't it?
Look, it is. So, we'll just, I think, probably need to close up there because our time sort of slipped away today, but that was fantastic talking to Julian.
Absolutely. I think I learnt a lot from it at least. I'm sure the students will as well.
Absolutely. And the next steps are pretty straightforward. Join up to the conference tomorrow if you'd like to ask any questions about any of the things we've talked about today. And we're going to have the conferences now on every month. So virtual meetup every month based on the Cisco Digital Schools Network. Make sure you complete your regional SDG plans and then let me see, the students who are coming to Mauritius. We'll get back to you about a short presentation on your regional plan, and we'll need to be getting everybody into teams so that we have 17 teams looking at the international plan and the actual projects coming out of those. So there's a fair bit of work to do, but a lot of fun to be had in actually taking all of the challenges that Julian talked about and turning things around.
Great. I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes.
Putting together a prosperous future.
Let's do it.
Earth. Great. Look, thank you very much, Holly, for today. Thank you, students and teachers, for joining us. And we look forward to talking to you for the very last broadcast, which will be beginning of December.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian.